Thanks, guys. I wanted to start by just giving some expectation regarding the talk. So you probably read about it on OSCON.com. This is a talk about innovation. So we're talking about open source and the lean startup methodology, and what I'm going to present to you is really a framework for merging the two methodologies and vetting innovative ideas. So the subtitle to this presentation is the framework for the blueprint for transformational innovation. I wanted to start by talking about the term innovation. Make sure my slides are advancing. Innovation is one of those loaded words that for most people, innovation means that you've created something very complex, or that people that have very high skills have created something that's very scientific, things that most people can't do. So that term usually means some high-tech innovation. My definition of innovation are a solution that actually has significant impact. And so as I'm using the term innovation, I'm referring to solutions which have significant impact on an organization, a community, on people. And so that's what I mean by innovation. And so just to give you some background on my background, again, my name is Kishau. I'm from Virginia. I am a computer scientist. My degree is in computer science. I have about 20 years of experience in the technology industry. I am a serial entrepreneur. I have a firm called Websmith Group that I started about 12 years ago, and I have about equal amount of experience in corporate as well. I have a startup that I've recently started, and so today what I'm going to do with you is to help you understand how to take ideas from conception into commercial settings. And what I'll do is just give you some examples of some projects that I've worked on, as well as some things that I've read about and noticed and have been collaborating with people in this space. So I wanted to start with this message, which is innovation is not a business. So there are a lot of innovation centers, innovation programs, maker spaces. A lot of corporate enterprises have innovation programs that people use to create new ideas or new approaches to existing technologies. Our version of innovation is that it's not a business, it's a mindset. So I want to start there. Secondly, as I mentioned, we're going to be talking about how to merge lean startup methodology and how to use open source principles and tools to facilitate better ideas, to create better ideas, and to speed up the rate at which we learn about these ideas. One of the things I wanted to point out, innovation generally starts with an idea. So generally someone comes to you with a bright idea. I want an app. I want to build something. This is my idea. What happens normally is that resources are invested in the building of the idea, in executing that idea, and creating an app. This methodology requires that the resources be invested in evaluating the idea and vetting the idea and experimenting and determining whether this idea is compelling and viable enough to invest resources in. So resources should never be invested in executing ideas. They should be invested in testing your hypothesis. So the framework that I'm going to explain today requires 5 stages of innovation. We start with vetting ideas. So we've talked about the idea phase. I've mentioned that ideas aren't businesses. A lot of times people have ideas and they want to rush to build something, patent something. An idea is really just an opportunity. And so in building innovation programs and innovation spaces, it's very important to define what's the importance of an idea. If you consider an idea to be a business, then what happens in a corporate environment and in a business, the idea goes through what we call stage gates. So you come to me with an idea, and then it has to follow the channel. It has to go through an approval process of corporate executives, key stakeholders. They decide whether your idea is valuable enough to do anything with. And a lot of times that is based on business metrics. It may be based on who presented the idea. So if you're in a position, a decision-making position, your ideas may be valued heavily over someone that's not in that position. And so in terms of open source principles, we present in the idea phase that all ideas should be considered. And so all ideas should be considered because all ideas are valuable, and the idea is really just an opportunity to continue to explore. And so that's what we do here. I wanted to point out really quick about the slide. So in running through this talk, I'm going to present a high-level framework. There are open source tools that can be used in each one of these phases. I'll point out a few of them. I won't dive into a lot of details regarding how to use them, but they are noted on the slide deck. The slide deck will be available on OSCON.com, so you don't have to take a lot of notes. You can just download the slide or email me directly. In terms of ideas, there are plenty of brainstorming tools in the open source space. There's Xmind. I've used a tool called Lean Launchpad Central. That's pretty great. There are tons of them, and so we've noted a few of them here. I wanted to continue to explore a little bit about IDEA by telling you a story regarding a product that we started with in 2002. So we have a product that it was our first, in WebSmith Group, is our first product that we launched commercially, and it started in my prior corporate position. So I used to be the director of a group of people in a hospital, and our group we were the innovation program for this particular healthcare system. And my job was to vet ideas and to build special solutions. We were like the special ops team. So we would go in and build things that were not appropriate for the IT department to build. And so in that role, I was called, the CFO reached out to me. He wanted to get my help in building an ETL script. He needed me to build something that would take data out of massive Excel files. He had hundreds and hundreds of Excel files. And he wanted to build a script that would automatically take that data out, transform it, load it into a central database. So he presented me with an idea, and he just wanted my help in executing it. In terms of vetting ideas, we were in an environment where all ideas were considered. So my background is in computer science, but the thing that I do best is I am curious. I always want to know why. So I was always the child that would ask why. Well, why? Why are you doing this? Why do you need this? What are you doing? And so I wanted to know more about him at that phase. So general innovation procedures require requirements gathering. So your natural instinct is, okay, let me do a meeting, let me gather requirements, and let me figure out, what do you want me to build? I went to his office to just learn why. I want to know who you are. I want to know what's a day in the life of a CFO, and I want to know what was the pain point that caused you to call me to build the script. And so in meeting with him, I walk into his office, and another thing that you wouldn't know about me is that I'm a little bit OCD. And so I am the person that's most likely to organize M&Ms by color. I'm very obsessive. I will organize pens by color. I put books in order on the bookcase. If they're not in order by height, it drives me crazy. So I'm that person. And so I walked into his office, and I immediately noticed boxes. The walls were littered with boxes. And it looked like Hoarders, like the executive office edition of Hoarders. There were boxes everywhere, and there were blue sheets of paper all over the floor. And, I cringed, but I sat with him and I said, okay, tell me about this ETL project. And so he's talking, and I'm like, wait a minute. Let's stop. What is all of this? What are these boxes, and what are these blue sheets of paper? And he said, well, the blue sheets of paper, that's the data that I'm putting into these Excel spreadsheets. And the reason why they're blue is because there's a lot of paper in here, and I need to be able to find those sheets quickly. So I made people print them out on blue paper. And so I thought, okay, well, that's a little bit genius, but there are boxes everywhere. And so then he explained regulations and auditing procedures and how he had to keep these boxes. And so as we're talking, he's still on his idea, which is give me a script that will automatically load data from this Excel into a central database so that I can do my analysis. And so in an open environment, I was able to say, what if we could figure out how to get rid of these boxes? And what if I could figure out how to make it so that you don't have to deal with these blue sheets of paper anymore? And in being in front of him and seeing his office and looking at the chaos, I could see what the compelling value proposition was. And it wasn't a script. It was get these boxes out of my office, fix this so I don't have to deal with this paper. So that was something that I was able to do because of the meritocracy that we had in that environment, which allowed me to say, I have an idea. Would you consider this instead of that? And so I'll go into more detail about that particular project. It's called Time Study, and started in 2002, and it was launched in 2003, and it's a product that's still in the marketplace. Today, hospitals across the nation use Time Study. Time Study started out as a potential ETL project and ended up being something very different. So we'll talk about that. The next thing, I'm sorry, I need to get some water. The next thing I want to mention is about people. So I talked about the CFO and myself and the administrative assistant that's responsible for entering the data in spreadsheets, and we had a researcher on our team. So our team was very diverse. And so I want to talk to you about who's on your innovation team. This is really, really important. So you'll notice I'm 10 minutes into this talk and I haven't said anything about building anything yet. So we have an idea, we haven't built anything yet. So now we have to figure out who's on the team, who's on the innovation team. The philosophy is that teams should include a diverse group of people. And what I mean by diversity, I'm not referring to typical check boxes, race, gender, and the typical check boxes. I'm referring to perspectives, background, experiences in life. And so typically what happens is that innovation teams will have builders, because we really focus a lot on the building. And I hate saying it because as a person that started my career and as a programmer, I hate to say it, but we focus too much on the building. And so we want to get a team full of people that know these certain tools, and we put them together and we say, hey, build something. The problem with that is they don't often have the perspective to generate great ideas. And so in order to create a team that can do that, you have to add to that team not only people that can execute, but people that have great ideas. Some people just are people that think big. They come up with really good ideas, not at all interested in executing it, but they're really good at seeing opportunities for new things. You have some people that consume information. They know things. And so things that you need to know, they already know. So they're subject matter experts. Another important person on the team is the person that is impacted by the thing that you're trying to build. And so often we don't include those people on our team until the end of the process. So we will do a focus group, maybe a user survey. We get some information from them, and then we put a wall up, and we go into the lab, and we build something, and then we come back out with here, try to use it, let me see if that works. It doesn't work very well, and so we have to put them on the team. And what I mean by on the team, that means they're engaged, they're an active participant in determining what this solution will look like. So if you're building an app for construction workers, guess what? You should have a construction worker on your team with the developers and the UI people and the back end and the front end developers. So that's what a team looks like. Next, I'm going to talk about something that we call customer discovery. And how I discovered this, what I described to you with time study was a small version of customer discovery. The industry has changed a lot. Things are a lot more competitive, and a lot of the solutions that work really well are things that they spent a lot of time in customer discovery. And what that means is that they understand very clearly who their customers are and why they're offering the solution to them. What's the value? So I mentioned I have a startup that I just co-founded with a university professor. It's called Peerlog. It's a geolocation solution. And so that solution essentially allows you to find people and things in GPS-denied environments. So Dr. Chang spent a lot of time figuring out how do we find people in environments where the GPS doesn't work. If you're on a battleground, you're underwater, you're in a tunnel, how can we accurately find them with low consumption on the device, quickly, and I can find you in this building on the 4th floor. So that's the solution. So the time study example is a problem looking for a solution. This example, we have a solution, what we're looking for someone to use it. And so we enrolled in the NSF I-Corps program. I-Corps is a program, it's a grant program, and they give you money to build prototypes. The difference with NSF I-Corps and other grant programs is that as a requirement to receiving that money, they require that you do what they call customer discovery. So they don't give you a single dime. They're not giving you $1 until you vet this idea and learn about your customers and figure out who are the customers, what's the value proposition. And so we joined the I-Corps program. First day of the program, they did a quick, brief overview of Lean Startup Method. And so I'm in the room, mostly scientists. They're biomedical engineers, nuclear engineers, computer scientists. There was a rocket scientist. So it's a room full of scientists, a few business people. And they went over Lean Startup Method. They talked about customer discovery. And then they said, okay, let's eat lunch. You get 30 minutes. Then I want you to get out of the building. And you could feel the room there was tense silence. And people were confused, like, what do you mean? What are we going to do? I want you to go outside, find 10 people that could potentially use this thing you're trying to create and talk to them. Don't talk to them about your idea. So we had rules. We couldn't say a word about our idea. We could not talk to people that we already knew. And we had to simply learn what a day in the life was for this customer, what do they care about, and what we were listening for was for the customer to say, if I had something that looks like the thing you're trying to create, life would be so much better. And if a customer says that without you pulling it out of them, then you know you have a compelling idea. So they told us to leave the building. It was really hysterical. I wish I could have recorded people like literally leaving the building like this. They were just demotivated because the process of actually talking to people that you don't know is something that people are very reluctant to do. So it's easy when you've been trained to be a developer to just start building because that's what you do. You can build. But when someone says, go outside, talk to people that you don't know about what this is you're creating and learn what do they care about. Figure out if what you're building solves that problem. And if it's not, then you have to pivot and change your idea. And so that's what we did. We call that getting out of the building. It was a really good process. One good way to do that is to participate in events like this. Civic Hackathons are really great because it allows you to get in a space with people that care about social impact, and you can actually do your get out of the building stuff while you're at the hackathon. You can align with people that you're trying to serve and get with them and understand what they're caring about. So there are opportunities in the open source community to do customer discovery. Next, I wanted to note that everything is an experiment. So a lot of times with this process, once you interview, we interviewed 100 customers. That was the other requirement. We had to interview 100 people that we did not know. And the first 20 interviews were ridiculous. I mean, we were stumbling, we were stuttering, we were terrified. By the 20th, we learned a lot. So by the 20th interview, we realized, first of all, we don't know our customers. Secondly, they don't care about what we thought they cared about. And we pivoted maybe 10 times during that process. So we interviewed, I think, a total of 120 people during this 2-3 week period. We traveled all over the United States talking to the people that we need to talk to. That's the level of innovation that you need to do before you start building. So in terms of performance, the thing that you do next, so you know your idea, you know why you're building what you're building, you have a hypothesis, which is, I think this person needs this for this reason, because this is the value proposition. And the reason should be very measurable. At this point, you need to understand, what am I measuring? And it must be very specific. So if you're building something that's a little bit all things to all people, that's not an experiment. An experiment is, can I remove the blue boxes out of this man's office and take this out of the equation? That was my experiment with the time study app, was how does the removal of the blue boxes affect operational efficiency, operational costs, and the quality of data? And so that was my experiment. The next step was to prototype that. This is a visual actually of the Lean startup, the Lean Launchpad canvas. This is how we measured our customer discovery. And again, there are tons and tons of tools out there that allow you to gather this information and track it. So you'll see in the right-hand column, those are customer segments. You see how many we had? We had tons of, we were gonna do something for everyone. Everyone needed this solution. And then in this column, this is your value proposition. So these are the things we thought people cared about. With customer discovery, each one of these boxes is a hypothesis that I have to prove before I build anything. And so when we were interview number 30, we realized that, and we quickly eliminated segments that were not compelling and did not have high impact on the bottom line. So the things that I've highlighted there, that's what we learned as we went out. We learned really quickly that it's almost impossible to get into the military space and get the Department of Defense to buy things for us. It would take 10 years. So we eliminated them. The average person with a smartphone was a customer segment, which is pretty much everyone in the world. We realized average Joe, they don't care about the seconds of difference in speed to localize something. Didn't really too much care about being found in a tunnel, those kind of things. So we learned that that wasn't compelling, and we found a compelling space. So that's what our experiment was with PeerLoad. So this is on rapid prototyping. So now I have a hypothesis. I know exactly what I want to measure. Now I start building. So at this point, I know I'm building an app that will remove blue boxes from this man's office to improve operational efficiency, reduce his costs on administrative costs for data entry, and would improve quality of data. And so that was it. So we knew we had to do simply that. Now, in terms of choosing tools, with time study, the pilot, the prototype, we built that in Notepad. And by we, I mean me. I opened Notepad, I used VB script, JavaScript, and I had a backend MySQL. And I built forms, time study forms that looked exactly like they literally looked like the blue sheets of forms. I called it eBlue Sheets. It was pilot eBlue Sheets, and we selected a small group of physicians to use it, and I measured the difference in operational efficiency, cost reduction, and validation. And so that was the prototype. I didn't pull out any big tool. That was all I used. Notepad, VB script, JavaScript. Wrote it up. It was within 2 weeks we were piloting that idea. So that's rapid prototyping. It's getting out there to do that. You can't do rapid prototyping if you're big. So if your idea is just so big, you don't know exactly what you're measuring, very difficult to do something like that and turn it around that quick. But when you're very specific that this solution alone, if I get forms that can validate data in real time and remove the element of data entry people entering it, then I can get those blue boxes out of his office. And so that's what we did. What we learned was that we were correct, that the value proposition was correct. It was a huge return on investment, but we also learned that there were things we didn't consider. So what we didn't consider was that the administrative team did not have to enter data anymore, but they had to spend time reminding people to enter their data. So before they would enter it, now they're spending all the time, please log in and enter your data onto this form. So they spent time doing that. So that sparked another experiment, which is what can we do to remind people? How can we build this technology so that it will remind people so that these people don't have to do that? And so that's how we evolved that product over the course of, it's been 13 years now, but it has evolved. And so back in 2002, our issue was paper. How do we get rid of the paper? Today, the issue is, how do I eliminate the need for these people to explicitly report their time? Data's everywhere. How can I integrate and pull this data from other sources so that they don't have to log in and submit their time? So that's innovation. And if you keep doing that experimental process, then you can keep a product in the marketplace forever, because you're constantly adjusting to the needs of the customer. And so the customer that I'm referring to, they still use the product. It's been 13 years. And so the only reason that they still use this product is because we do this over and over and over again. We just keep doing this. And so it evolves as they evolve. One of the things I wanted to point out was content first approach. So you may know that everyone knows Groupon by now. Groupon is site, you get discounts on retail products and services and vacations and things like that. Groupon's first prototype was a WordPress site because they took a content-first approach, which was our value is that we're giving this information to these people, and we want to measure if it's a compelling value proposition for people and who that's for. And so they put up a WordPress site, they typed in information, and they launched that. And they learned a lot through that. And so with that process, they were able to take the resources that they would have spent building something huge that may or may not have worked, and they put that into building something that they know worked because they did the rapid prototyping. So I wanted to point that out. There are some other tools noted here. I mentioned MySQL, WordPress, tons of tools, there are tons of tools that you can use to do rapid prototyping. Even in design, Bootstrap is always good when you're doing rapid prototyping. Next, I wanted to mention money. Everyone's wondering, well, how do you fund this? Because a lot of corporations have innovation programs within their companies, and it's funded by the company. The problem with investing too much money too quickly is that money can actually delay your ability to know that your business model sucks and it doesn't work. So if you have a lot of money to do this experimenting that I'm talking about, it may take you a while before you realize that this doesn't actually work. And so with this process, one of the things that I recommend is bootstrapping to the degree that you can to make it tight as necessary to do this prototype and this iteration, the customer discovery. And the reason why that's important is it creates creativity, because you have this much to work with. You have to figure out how to make things efficient. And so as you're doing your prototyping, you're figuring out how to make things efficient. When you have a lot of funds to do that, you don't have to figure that out. And actually, it takes you longer before you realize that the model doesn't work. And so through building the time study app, that's one thing that we learned. So our first iteration, we had a paying client using the first version of that product. In our profit plan, we built in that a percentage of that profit would be used to fund the next iteration. And so that's the model for that product. We use a percentage of the profit to fund it. We released the first version 2003. It's 2016. I've never taken a dime of VC money for that product. And it's a software as a service product. They pay for it, they love it, they use it. Our retention rates are great because we keep up with our customers, and we just keep doing that over and over and over. So in preparing this talk, I was trying to figure out, okay, how do I want to approach this? How do I want to present this information? And what I did was I took a look at all of the projects that we worked on and tried to figure out what works, what doesn't work. Over and over, this works. If you start with this process, if you put more emphasis on the thinking and the getting to know people before you build, and if you make it tight so that you don't have a lot of money to build, you have to figure out how to do this on a shoestring so that you can figure out what the model looks like. You can build a business that is very scalable. And so another thing I wanted to point out is about business models when you're developing using open source tools. So some businesses will use open source tools to create the product. Some businesses use open source tools just in the process of innovation. So you're using it to track things that you're doing, but you're not putting it in your product. If your product has any use of open source tools, you have to determine, so what's my business then? If I'm using open source tools, where's the business? And one approach is that if the open source part of the product is the core part of the product, it stands alone, it has a customer segment, it offers value, it's its own product, that you can build commercial extensions to that product, and perhaps that's your revenue model. An alternative is that your business is an open source product, but that your revenue model are services, consulting services, support services, and other items, and that's how you make your money. So that's important as you're prototyping, to identify the balance between the use of the open source tools and also the business and how you're going to structure your business. This is a little cheat sheet that I've used to ensure that open source principles are tightly integrated into the process of innovation. So this is essentially the 5 things that I just talked about. It's a way of keeping things very well defined. So purpose, that's your hypothesis. What am I testing? And you identify I'm testing this, and this is how I know. I talked to this many people. Performance, that's how am I going to learn whether this hypothesis is true? And so you define what that is. You identify what you've learned. People, this is a way to support open collaboration and sharing. Your team should always have certainly internal people that you work with all the time, but also should include collaborators and subject matter experts. And so I mentioned earlier that one of my recent startups is a partnership with the university professor. That happened because as a part of how we work on projects, we are constantly bringing people in to work with us, and that's how I met him, and so we've collaborated. Doesn't work for me at all, but that's how we've collaborated. So that's collaboration. Community of impact. Those are the people that you are building the tool for. You need some of those people on your team. Tools here, we talked about idea management. Identifying, this presentation has a list of things that you can use to sort of identify all of the ideas that you have and how do you manage those ideas. Identify tools that you're going to use to build the prototypes and the extensions that you're building. To identify the tools that you use to measure your experiments. And finally, to identify what you've learned about that. And then place, we talked about place, that's getting out of the building. So you can't do innovation in a building. So it's great to have an innovation space, a maker space, a building, a place that you tinker. if you want to do transformational innovation, you have to leave that building and go where the people are that you're trying to serve. Unless you're building a solution for the innovation space, then stay in the space. But you have to get out of that space so that you can get the information that you need about the product. So that's what place is. Where do you gather information? Tons of tools, events, places for you to get information, data sets. What are you sharing with people? So as you are building, what are you giving back to the community? Are you telling them, I did this experiment, this is what I learned, I used this open source tool to do this prototype, this is what I learned, I modified this, let me upload it. You have to share that information. And then discovery. How are you discovering whether your idea is an idea that's compelling enough to build? So that is a quick run through of the framework for transformational innovation. One of the things I wanted to make sure that we had some time for questions. Does anyone have any questions? Yes? Hey.
One question about your opinion on getting out of the building when you're doing innovation. And I know a lot of, as an entrepreneur who's working on a new product, a new idea, there's some education that you have to do for your target customers.
Yeah.
I wonder if you just personally have figured out how to balance kind of learning from your potential customers versus educating them on what's possible.
Oh, I see. So with some ideas, I think what you have to do is to connect to the value proposition. So instead of connecting to the tech and sort of the emerging tech and what's possible there, you want to connect to the why. Like I'm cleaning up the man's office, I'm getting rid of these boxes, I'm reducing costs. So if you connect with that, if you're talking to a customer and they say, hey, that's my pain point, I think about it all the time, I wish there was a way to resolve that pain point. You don't have to necessarily educate them about how you're going to resolve that pain point. So focus on why, always focus on why. A lot of times we focus a lot on the app, the tool, the tech. Those things are very, very important. But in taking ideas from conception to commercialization, thinking and this evaluation and analyzing is critically important, and also structuring your innovation projects so that they are experiments. They're not business launches, they're an experiment. And so it's a constant experiment. You want to test that hypothesis, you put a prototype, you put a feature in front of them, you have tools to measure if it works, then you push it into production if it does. And so you have to think of it that way. So when you're engaging with customers, think about the why it's important, the value that you're offering. You don't necessarily have to educate them on emerging tech and everything that's possible. Okay. Any other questions?
Yeah. So you talked about forming a diverse innovation team. In your experience building these innovation teams, are you evaluating personality types as well as perspectives?
Yes, sometimes. It depends. So personality types, that's a tricky one. You have certain personalities that work well together. What I find often is that if I focus more on the value that we're offering. And so the teams that we build, each person is offering some value to that process. So I personally don't focus on personalities unless personalities become a problem. I often find that sometimes that friction with personalities also sparks some creativity as well. And so I don't want to just say, oh, I don't think this person would work well with that person, because what do I know? So if this person knows what they need to know to add to this project and this person can execute, put them on the project, let them work together, and they can be adults. And so if they can't work together, it's a different question. But for me, it doesn't impact the innovation and the forming of teams at all. Okay. Other questions? Yes.
Can you talk about timeline? How do you balance the process and then time to market?
Yes. Yeah. So timelines are important. Timelines are often driven by business metrics. So innovation, I'm separating this from the business, right? So the business will drive you to do things quickly because you want to hurry up and make money. You can quickly do customer discovery. We did 100 interviews in 3 weeks. So you can either do it in 2 or 3 weeks, or you can take 6 months, but you still must do it. So the process is what it is. The business part is what drives the timeline, because often the person with the idea, they have this urge to make money. And we're in a climate where make an app innovate is synonymous with making money. And so everybody wants an app. They don't know why yet, but they want an app. And so that's what happens with that process. Is often it infects this process because you have to hurry up and do things, and you're just trying a little bit of everything and throwing darts at a board. And so that's not ideal. What you usually learn is that you'll over-engineer the product to the degree that you just try a little bit of everything and hope that something works and hope that you start getting paid. So you really can't avoid that process. That's why this part, doing this on a shoestring, is very important, and approaching it as an experiment and not a long development process that's very costly. If it's really costly, you run into a situation where the innovation owner, the person that's funding it, they become very antsy because they've spent a lot of money already and they need to get a return on that money. So that's what it kind of avoids that, so that you can freely vet the idea. Okay? You had a question?
Once you've run the experiment with the innovation team and you decide you're going to turn it into a product, use the same team, different team?
Team morphs for sure. So at that point, you need people to do ongoing customer discovery. Sometimes it's the same person. If they're committed to the product, they may stay with it because they want to keep going. It's ideal if at least one person from that team is on what we call the maintenance team. The maintenance team, those are the support teams. And they kind of support and engage with the customers as they're using the product. They collect information on what's working with this client and what's not working. So those people have intimate knowledge. They continue that conversation with the customer. It could be you. It could be the person that's more connected to them. It may be someone on their team. It doesn't have to be. The important thing is that the customer discovery is done on an ongoing basis so that they can then tell the innovation team, hey, there's this issue here that we may want to create a solution for. So that's what's important. Other questions? Great, you guys didn't fall asleep. Awesome. And we have 3 more minutes left. So this is my information. If you would like a copy of this, go on OSCON.com. Can't find it, just email me, tweet me, call me. That's my information there. So feel free to reach out. And also, if you have some ideas, if you're in an innovation program and it's slightly different from this and things are working for you, I would love to hear from you, to hear what's working for you. Okay? Thanks, guys.